computer. Hello, everyone. This is the Happy Career Guru channel, and I'm Prasad. Recently, I was listening to a podcast, and in that podcast, there was this researcher, a psychologist actually, who was talking about this topic called self-awareness. Now, there are two or three things that I picked up from that particular podcast that I'm going to share here. The first thing is what people think or how self-aware people think they are is generally far from how self-aware they really are once you start comparing in terms of what others think of them and where they think they are. Now, one of the reasons why this happens supposedly is that when we look at others, we look at it through the lens of the actions that we can see. So there is actually factual data that you can look at. So you know exactly when you're evaluating others, you can be very accurate about how you're evaluating them. However, when you are evaluating yourself, it is on the basis of your beautiful intentions. So the point is, at that time, we have a filter among ourselves, which basically means we always think we are slightly better than we are. Ask me, I think like that all the time. Okay. Now, with that, let me introduce you to our guest today, who I'm going to spend some time discussing self-awareness. Shivani and I go a long way back. I first met Shivani in 1996 in a small town called Ahmedabad in India, right? We did we met together in our post-graduation. And now, for 15 years after that, Shivani went to a lot of corporate jobs. She worked in management in different places. However, there was always something niggling at her in terms of whether she's doing what she actually liked to do. Right from childhood, she was interested in psychology. She was interested in human behavior. So she took a small detour for 15 years, did a lot of good corporate work. But sometime in the recent past, she came back. She definitely wanted to focus on human behavior, on exactly how to help people. And that's when she found coaching. She's an ACC certified coach, is completely credentialed. She runs a company called Mind Ready in Singapore. So with that, Shivani, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Prasad, and lovely to be talking to you after a long time and talking about this subject that I really love about talking. So yes, happy to be here.
So actually, I'll start with one point, right? You coach. You said actually when we talked before the actual podcast, you said, I coach because I love it. It is my ikigai. I'm going to be doing this for a long time. Till the day I die is what you said. Now, the point was, to a certain extent, I'll make an assumption here that this sentence didn't come out easy. This sentence is not something you said out one fine day, you woke up and said it. There went a lot of, I would say, analysis and understanding and introspection and reflection that went into that sentence. So coming to the same topic that we were talking about in terms of self-awareness, right? What are the benefits of being self-aware? Why should I even care?
Oh, huge benefits, Prasad. I mean, I can't even start to list the ways in which the benefits manifest. And, it might, if it's okay, I'd like to share a personal story over here. Yeah. So when I was so like you said, there was this huge part of my life, about 10, 15, 20 years actually, where I was going through the system, do my graduation, do my post-graduation, struggling with psychology, but still want to do something in management. So ended up doing consumer insights and stuff. But while I was in college and studying, I used to go back home after every term, and my mother used to make sure that I'm woken up in the morning and pulled in the kitchen and come and learn how to cook, because from a small town in India, that's what mothers do to females. So and at that time I would stand there grumpily and I would tell her that listen, I don't need to know how to cook. I don't like it. I'm going to hire a cook. Yeah, I'm going to be working and I'm going to hire a cook. So just leave me alone. And then cut to finishing post-graduation after working for a few years, and I got married and we were in our own place. And I automatically started to take over the kitchen. And not that I knew how to cook. I would call up, my aunt in the same city and ask her, how do I make so-and-so dish? And I still remember ladyfinger was one of them, which I couldn't understand. And then I fell into that rigmarole, and till date, the kitchen is my domain. Yeah, I have done whatever I've done now. But at one point in time, I suddenly realized what happened. I was pretty aware of the fact that I don't like cooking. Yeah, I even said it to my mom that I will hire a cook. I did hire a cook, but I still ended up cooking a lot more than I would have ideally liked to. And that's how I'm linking this back to the awareness piece, Prasad, is that there are sometimes things you say, but you've not really become conscious of, or you've not kind of, centered in them. And there's a lot of unconscious actions that may end up happening in your life without your realizing whether you really want to do it or not. So honestly, what being self-aware does is it takes you away from the automatic mode. Yeah. Getting married, taking care of the kitchen was automatic mode. It was not a self-aware mode. And only about 6 years, 5 years ago, when I kind of realized that, why am I even doing this, and questioning my thoughts and understanding actually why I did those things, helped me say and make a different choice for myself today. Yeah. So that being one. The other thing also is that I was reading a book the other day on grit, and it talked about practice being one of the main things that makes you really good at whatever you are trying to do. Yeah. However, the difference was it's not just practice, it's deliberate practice. Yeah. So if you're running every day for 10 years of your life, it's not going to make you the expert. But if you're doing deliberate practice, and what I mean by deliberate practice is that you have a focus, a target. This is what I want to do. And that again comes with the clarity of what I am and what I want to be. Then things like values. Yeah. If you're aware and self-aware about your values, they become a huge North Star, a radar that you can, the North Star that you can look at, especially in times of chaos, especially in times when decision making becomes difficult. Because if you then hone back to your values, to use them as a support for making your decisions, you don't make decisions that you regret later.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. And actually, that's a great segue. So there's so much to unpack here, but let me try to very quickly summarize what I have noted so far. The first thing is there has to be something that's very specific or deliberate about what you're trying to be aware of. It's not like I want to be aware of who I am is not even a question that you want to ask, saying that it is very situational. It could be very, very specific to a particular today. There may be something that comes in my life that may make me think about something that I need to be aware of. But tomorrow, the situation could be different and it could be something that you haven't ever experienced before, at which time you may potentially, it's almost like you will uncover another muscle in your self-awareness journey that you haven't seen before. Yes. So having values or your North Star or your outcome is very important. And the second thing is it is situational. And the third thing is fundamentally every time you're asking who you are. And it's again the repetitive question, but the answer may be different because who you are has so many answers that you can't count.
Yeah, totally agree, Prasad. So who you are, I mean, at a very spiritual level, it's a completely different answer. But, yeah, at the practical level, when you're talking of self-awareness, you can be talking about self-awareness from the way you think. Yeah, what your personal reality is, what your values are, like I mentioned, also about what your triggers are. The kind of ego state you come from, what your limitations are, how are the ways in which you sabotage yourself, what do you want your future to be, what are certain inner conflicts that you have. So these are, if I may call, certain branches of the self-awareness tree.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. So now let me just sort of make it practical for our listeners, right? Now, the idea is that obviously this is a journey. Maybe there is something that you have to do every single day of your life to just understand yourself a little bit more than you understood yesterday. However, to make it practical, what are the few things that some people can do on their own just to increase their self-awareness by a notch? Because there's enough research out there that says that if you really behave, even in the corporate world, if you behave in a more self-aware manner, generally you will tend to be respected a little bit more because people know you mean what you say, and there's not really too much guessing that needs to happen because you are aware of what's happening there. You're also aware of how you're reacting to the situation. I see so many times, even in offices, where when somebody is giving me feedback about somebody else, they say that person does not demonstrate self-awareness. So they know something about it. I don't know what it is. They don't demonstrate self-awareness, which is indicated to say, I don't see this person behaving in a way that's consistent with what's expected. So what are the steps that people can take that can help them in the journey of becoming slightly more self-aware?
Before I answer, with the tools or the steps that one can take, this thing that you mentioned about other people knowing, how somebody is self-aware or not, actually being self-aware also adds a lot to the kind of relationships you have. Because when you're aware of your own biases and when you're aware of your own emotions, and emotional awareness being a subset of self-awareness, you're able to then have very meaningful transactions where you're aware of which ego state you're coming from when you're interacting with the other person, for example, or what emotion you are, because emotions get really jumbled up. Sometimes you're actually afraid, but anger comes. It manifests as anger or shouting. So being aware of that literacy. However, coming back to the question that you asked me about, what can people do to become more self-aware? Is that what
Yes,
you would like
that
your
was the
audience
question.
to take? Okay. Um, to start with, at a very basic level, people can use psychometric tests. There are a lot of psychometric tests that will help people understand what their big 5 personality traits are, what their strengths are, the Clifton Strengths Finder, and there are very many such psychometric tests available. It's good to take them. However, a word of caution here, if it does, if a psychometric test labels you as an introvert, don't take it as a gospel truth. Yeah, it is a indication for you to explore further. What you figure out about yourself is far more important, which brings me to the next step, which is reflection being the biggest tool that you have towards self-awareness. Yeah. And when I say reflection, means you are basically asking questions to yourself about yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah. One most important thing over here is the kind of questions that you ask yourself. And I think it's very important to mention here that when mostly when people sit down to reflect what happened in the day or what is happening in this certain area of their life, they tend to ask, why am I like this? Why did this happen? Why is not this not working out for me?
Mhm.
And a caveat here, to not use why questions, but to use what questions. To give you an example, if you ask yourself, why do you like ice cream? Why do you like ice cream, Prasad?
I actually don't, but that's okay. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, yeah. But if I ask you, what about ice cream do you like? What
Yeah,
would you say?
you're right. I'd actually talk about, let's say, why that cold feeling on a hot day, that sweetness that touches your tongue and stuff like that. I'll get into some feelings that I have when I'm actually having that ice cream. By the way, I do like ice cream. It was a joke, but lost.
Yeah, but you see what I'm saying here. The
Yes,
moment you
yes.
ask yourself what questions, you start to get some answers. Yeah, you like the coldness of the ice cream on a hot day. You like the sweetness, the flavor on your tongue. Yeah,
Mm,
but if you ask why do you like ice cream, you may actually draw up a blank. I don't
yes.
know. I like ice cream. Yeah, so
Yeah.
so ask the right questions to yourself when you do. Be aware of the fact that your primal primitive brain is likely to hijack yourself with biases, with generalizations, with should should do things, and filtering.
Mm,
uh, so be aware of those, so educate yourself on those biases and then start to see them in yourself. And
perfect.
here is when actually mindfulness helps a lot, because if you do mindful practices, you're able to then bring that mindfulness into your daily interactions. Yeah. So when you learn to kind of take a breath and then respond,
Mm.
you're able to then view yourself in that interaction. And therefore, you're not just reacting, you're responding.
Yeah, I wish I can
Yeah.
do that better than I do today. But the thing is, but if I just sort of reflect on what you said, the first thing is obviously there's a lot of studies in the market or psychometric tests in the market. The only caveat there is to make sure that don't assume that the label is gospel, but it's just a directional input so that you can explore further. The second thing is good old fashioned thinking or reflection that you talked about, which basically where you said ask the right questions around the why and the what. And I think when we were talking previously, you also were talking about journaling so you want to talk about that too as a very, and if you can give some examples of how that may have helped somebody in a particular scenario?
Okay. Yeah. So journaling helps because sometimes, you're not able to do that self-reflection.
Mm,
Just sit down and do that self-reflection.
mm,
You can actually do that self-reflection with the journaling.
mm,
Yeah. And a good way of starting that off is to look at what do you want to achieve. And just to give you an example of one of my clients who wanted to become more productive and wanted to understand what it is that is holding him back in not being as efficient as he would like to be.
mm.
So what he started doing was he started journaling for 10 minutes, every evening on the day. And the questions he used as prompts or triggers was, what did I do well today? Yeah, what could I have done differently today? And what really held me back from doing it differently? Yeah. So that helps them, helps you understand what are the things you want to continue doing and what might be some reasons why you're not being able to be as effective and productive as you are. Now, these prompts are fine, but after these prompts, the writing that you do in your journal should be free flow, because
Mm.
that's when you're really, key insights will pop up.
Perfect. Perfect. Now, I have one last question for you. What are the things or what are the obstacles that actually will stop us from making this self-awareness journey or our understanding of ourselves? It makes it more difficult for us to do it. Also, at this moment, I'll also want to ask you, apart from what we talked about in some steps, are there any particular tools that you know of that can also at least make this process a little bit easier for people to understand?
Okay. So I'm hearing two questions here,
Yes.
Prasad. One is specific tools, and the other is what the obstacles might be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me address the tools one first, because we've been talking about what people can do. And the favorite tool for self-awareness for most people is something called the Johari window.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a tool that creates a 2 by 2 matrix, and what you can do is actually do it for yourself.
Yeah.
So create a 2 by 2 matrix. On the y-axis, look at what other people know about you, and on the okay, you have something here for me. Okay, yes, on the y-axis you have what people know about you, and on the x-axis you have what you know about yourself. And then what you will see is you really get 4 blocks. The first one being how you use this is you start putting things in these boxes about your traits or the things about yourself.
Mm.
The first box, the blue one here, is what's called the open area, which is what you know about yourself and what other people also know. So everybody knows that Shivani is a coach. Yeah. And I also know I'm a coach. So there's no conflict here. There is no struggle over here. This is the open area. The other area is where I know something about myself, but the other person doesn't know. Yeah, that's the area, that's the hidden area. It's the curtained area. Now, these are the areas where we are vulnerable. We feel uncomfortable sharing those things about ourselves. Yeah. And once we do become self-aware, then that's the journey that we will take to become more accepting of ourselves. And when we reach there and we become more accepting of ourselves, that curtain will slowly drop. That's your action area for that particular box. That's the lavender one over here. Yeah. The blind spot is what other people might know about you, but you may not know about yourself. And this is like, the moments where somebody says something and you're like, really, do I do that? And, I'm actually inviting your audiences to think of the times when somebody has said something like that to you, and you've suddenly been taken aback saying, oh, I didn't realize I did that, or I was like that. Yeah. And the unknown is an area that you also don't know. So it's likely to be blank in your tool when you do it, because nobody can tell you about it also. They don't know and you don't know. And that's an area where you start to do your self-discovery and say, can I find out more about myself in whichever area? It could be, again, the ones that we listed out: emotions, beliefs, personality, strengths, whatever.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
actually, I can tell you a little bit of a story here.
Mhm.
I was preparing this particular slide when I thought, Shivani, instead of my speaking as a video on this particular topic, And I had seen some post of yours, which was similar to this. You didn't say Johari window, but you're talking self-awareness. I said, you know what, your topic of what you posted on LinkedIn versus what I was thinking at the time and creating this slide. And I said, you know what, maybe let's make this a podcast with Shivani. And that's basically how this entire thing came about. And I love this, especially this topic of the third one, the blind spot. Because actually, when I was listening to some podcast on self-awareness, there was a story about Marshall Goldsmith. Now, many of you may know Marshall Goldsmith. He's a very good guy, one of the most renowned coaches out there. Generally, when you see him on his videos and all that, generally looks very professorial, very easy, very authentic, right? And he is like that. He's a very nice guy, okay, all around. And there was some experiment that he did at some point in time where people told him that he interrupted people when they're talking. He said, come on, I can't do that kind of stuff. I'm this guy who's the friendliest of people. And he said, I'll give $10 every time you point that out. Within the first 2 hours, he was already down $50. And at that time, he shut himself in the room, supposedly, and started reflecting on what was going, right? There's another story about Brené Brown, who was talking about vulnerability, right? Again, where she gives her team unreasonable deadlines. And again, when in the book of Radical Candor, where she talked about when her team actually told her about it, she sat down and then started looking at her own thing. Both these people are great leaders, great authors, exactly, very big thinkers, in my opinion. And even they went through these discoveries to become who they are today, right? So again, this is just one tool, but the point is this journey of self-awareness that all of us have to go on is going to be very important for us. And again, there's no end to this. It's just an incremental, iterative process where you become better than you were yesterday, and that's victory. So.
Yes, absolutely. You also asked Prasad about the obstacles.
Yes.
And I do want to make sure that we talk about this for your audiences, is because one of the biggest obstacles towards this deep dive, if I may call it, into self-awareness is that the whole thing can be very uncomfortable. The entire process of looking into oneself, because you don't know what you will find. Yeah. And which is why I feel that the things that you do with self-awareness, whichever area, whether it's strengths, whether it's values, do it with a lot of self-compassion, because you talked about how we look at other people and look at their actions, but when we evaluate ourselves, we evaluate our intentions. This whole thing that's going on today in the social media world about seeking validation and being something that you're not is very harmful for self-compassion, because you look at yourself in your Instagram video, which is all filtered and made up, and then you look at yourself in the mirror and that reality exists, right? And that's the kind of discomfort you start feeling when you start delving into the depths of self-awareness, because you don't know what you will find. Yeah. And while I don't believe that there's anything good or bad, you were born as you are because you're meant to be here. The fact of the matter is we do have these good, bad boxes in our heads. So when you find something in there that you are labeling as bad, try and remove that label and look at it as this is just what it is. Yeah. And you'll always find something good in that so-called bad. Yeah.
And also, if you really, really don't want to, maybe that you can will it in terms of that.
Absolutely. You can do something about it.
But that's a great segue into how we can close this, especially like the journey of self-awareness also needs a dose of self-compassion. I think that's a fantastic way to probably end this conversation about self-awareness.
Lovely.
So that thank you, Shivani. So folks for who are there till at this point or who got this part of the audio first, this is Shivani. She is a coach in Singapore in a company called Mind Ready. That's her company. And feel free to reach out to her if you have any coaching needs. But thank you very much, Shivani. That was really, really wonderful conversation around self-awareness. And we'll do
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Lovely. Yes. Thank you for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Lovely. Bye.